All right, so in a previous video, I showed you how to build what I call my pixel art shader. It's a lot of fun for procedural techno art of various kinds, and there's a lot of things you can do with it. So that first video just shows you the basic stuff. And in fact, you can go and download that for free from my Gumroad account and just tweak it and go crazy with it. But after making that video, as I continue to play with my crazy creation, I found there's a lot of interesting other things you can do with it that I didn't even get to cover in that first video, because honestly, I didn't understand it all during that time, but I've learned a lot more about how it's working and how to get more out of it since then. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to further tweak the pixel art shader. The link is in the description down below, of course, and some really cool things. And I think you're also going to learn a lot about vector data and how it really works and what it's doing if you don't understand it already. Because I know I learned a ton just experimenting and just kind of doing trial and error. And well, what happens if I do this or this? I learned a lot. So I hope you learned it too. Let's get started. So I've got the file open that you will receive as well if you get the pixel art shader from my Gumroad account for the third time. I think I've said it enough. Go get it. And this is what it looks like. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go over here. This is a pixel art shader node group with all the handy dandy preset stuff. And this is the one from the sphere. So each one has the same node group, but different settings because it's technically in a different material. That's the cool thing about node groups is it's the same programming, like the same guts inside, but the external faders and stuff are all different. So let's just start with the blue one. Actually, I like this blue cyberpunk building one. And if you look right here, you see the number 5, which means 5 different objects are using this same node group. What are those 5? Well, they're all right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we click on the number 5, it will actually make a brand new node group, and it adds a .002 on the end. Because I already have a .001 for a different thing in this file. But yeah, so now we have a brand new node group, so we can change stuff inside of here, and it won't mess with the original pixel art shader node group that has no numbers on the end. So again, if you with a node group, you can select it and press tab to go into the guts and see what's inside and tweak the inputs and outputs and everything in between. You can also up here on the top right where it has this little icon, click on that and it's the same thing. It just goes into edit mode. That's what I call it, of a node group. So let's make a brand new setup here so we can just not ruin everything. So right click in your outliner, press new collection, and I'm going to name this experiment. With that collection selected, oh, by the way, I'm going to hide this other one. So click on the monitor, turn that off, and click on the camera to turn off render. Click on your experiment node group, and over here in your 3D viewport, Shift A, let's make a plane. And I'm going to press numpad 7. And then period key on my numpad to basically zoom into that. Next, I'm going to add a new camera for this new setup here. So Shift A, go to camera, press Control 0. Now that assigns that selected camera as the active camera, but the active camera hasn't been set up to the right place. So press 0 again to get out of that. And we're going to move that new camera, which is there for some weird reason. I don't know why it's facing downwards. We're going to assign it to a proper above view. So if you do Control Alt 0, now it sets your current view to your camera position, which saves us some time. We can, of course, tweak it over here in the object settings, your height and all that. So put it to the right height, and I'm actually going to make this a square render. So I'll do 2048 by 2048. That's in our output tab setting, and I need to adjust the height of my camera, or you can adjust the zoom. It's really the kind of, well, it's not the same thing, but same result. There we go. Okay, so that's set. Let's press Z and select material preview. So we're in material preview mode. This boring plane has no material. So make a new material, name it experiment, delete this BSDF, Shift A, go to group, and select your pixel art shader .002. Here it is. Connect your emissions to the surface, and we're ready to start having fun. Well, almost ready, because we need a UV thing here. So press Shift A, type in COR, texture coordinates, and we're just going to use a UV one. Now, this does not look very exciting right now, but I'm going to go into the settings of this node group and show you a bunch of really awesome, cool stuff, including how to blur an image using nothing but nodes, how vector coordinates work with the X and Y, and how colors turn into directional instructions for vector data. So let's get started by going into the node group right here. I have my layout kind of set up like this so that I get the most space out of my node groups here, because this is where most of the work's going to be doing, and we're going to see in real time the feedback here. If you want to get rid of these tools, just press T to clean up your workspace, and we're going to add an image group up here, an image node. Sorry, so Shift A, type in IMA image texture. There we go, And let's open a picture that you're very familiar with. So I'm going to go to my photography folder. And what I mean by familiar with is because we're going to be destroying this image. Like it's going to be chopped up and crazy. So I'm going to use this image of me. I'm going to press Control Shift and click on it. And that uses the Node Ringer add-on to basically make a little preview output of this image node. And it is not scaled perfectly. So I'm going to go to the UV editor, tab and edit mode, A to select all, and I'm going to fix that UV unwrap. There we go. It looks good. I know it's tiling. It's okay. Just deal with it. You can zoom in if you want, because I know you all have this picture on your hard drive, and you love to look at it every day. And it's very creepy, honestly. It makes me uncomfortable. So go back to shader editor, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the vector data that this crazy checker setup is creating, and I'm going to plug it into the vector data of the image, and let's see what happens. So these are being layered like Photoshop layers, except they're going downwards, and the final output is actually this guy right here. I'm going to plug this into the vector data of the image and see what happens. Wow, what is happening? I don't know. Well, actually I do, but you may not know. I'm going to teach you what's going on. So to play with our vector data and basically crossfade from the original to this craziness, we're going to use an RGB mix. So shift, type in mix RGB, plug it in right there, and make sure that your crazy checker vector data is going into color 2. And then color 1 is just going to be normal UV map. So you can actually use the UV map node if you want, make things clean. There we go. So UV data coming into the image texture node. If I have mix set to 0, I'm going to zoom in real close for you guys so you can watch this on your phone and still see what's going on. Factor 0 is all color 1, which is what? This UV data, okay? You don't have to select that, but you can. There we go. And if I crossfade to color number 2, whoa, WTF, mate. It's now all checker vector from all these crazy guys layered on top of each other. If you don't have any context and are very confused right now, just stop, go back to watch the first video, which will be linked down below. And also, like I said 3 times before, just download the gosh darn pixel art shader from Gumroad. All right, so crossfading gets this really crazy kind of zooming, but almost a blurring effect. So what is happening right now? And why is it going diagonal? You can see things are moving to the top right and other things are moving to the bottom left. And they're also scaling upwards. Well, that's because of how vector data works with colors and values. Let's actually preview what this UV map looks like in color form. So if I do Control Shift click, we get this weird thing. You may have seen this before, possibly accidentally. And yeah, this is vector data in its rawest form, right? RGB colors that humans can see and decipher, but the computers turn into all kinds of numbers and values to do specific things based on the coding. And I just realized I misspelled experiment on the material. And that bothers me. There we go. This is not 3-dimensional vector data. This is just 2-dimensional. So on the bottom left, we've got black. So the blacker a color pixel is coming into the vector data, the farther down to the bottom left, it will pull that area. The more green, lime green, goes to the top left, yellow goes to the top right, and red goes to the bottom right. Why those colors are picked, I don't know. I'm sure some smart person will let us know in the comments down below and blow all of our minds. But this is what color data does. All of this checker vector image data is just black and white checkers. It's all this. There's no color. We could add color and do all kinds of really interesting stuff to our destroyed image up here. But right now it's just black and white. So the black stuff gets shifted to the bottom left and the whiter pixels are pushing things to the top right. And that's why we get this effect. If we do other colors coming in, it'll do the opposite. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to make a color ramp, put it here, and instead of black to white, I'm going to make it lime green, which is top left, going to red, which is bottom right. Pretty cool. So now it's the opposite. And we can make stuff go to the top left and top right. I'm not sure what this will actually do. Let's see. Oh, weird. It got to go the opposite. It goes, pushes it down. We could do top left to bottom left, which is green and black, pushes it outwards away from those corners. And also some other things are going towards those corners. So lots of interesting stuff. We could reverse it also by making no saturation. And now it's doing kind of the opposite, but it looks the same to us as what I did earlier. So color data coming in as a vector input is going to move stuff around. Now with our image partially destroyed, I'm going to go out to the node group and play with the scale, because the scale is kind of everything for the checkers that we're creating. And we can increase the resolution of these checkers to really high. I'm going to go up to like 10. And if you zoom in, you can see these checkers are very, very small to the point where the screen really truly can't render all the checkers. You can see some weird Moir patterning and just crazy interference. So let's play with this little blur again. We can see it's blurring more finely, like almost like a pixel blur. What if we do this? What if we have all four corners? So we'll start with black, and then at dot 25, we'll go to the top left, which is what? Lime green. It gets more there. And then at dot 5, which is in the middle, will be the top right color, which is bright yellow. And then here at dot 75, the remainder of the top part of the gradient will be the red. So we've got all four directions. And now we should be able to blur in X, Y, and Z all at the same time. It looks like most of it's moving up to the top left. I don't know if that's actually true or if it's just kind of how, the screen is portraying it. But wow, that's pretty cool. You may not have known that you could do this with vector. I'm essentially blurring the image. I bet someone could figure out, let's try a hue rotation, see what this does. Oh my gosh, what? Look at that. I honestly didn't know this was possible. I'd never done this before. That's cool. We're literally rotating around the color wheel, and it's kind of rotating the vector data as well. Not perfectly, but pretty close. Maybe my color values are not perfect or something down here, but pretty interesting. If we take the saturation out of it, that also messes with things. Maybe you can increase saturation. Yeah, weird. Okay, well, I'm going to delete this by pressing Control X, which maintains the noodle, but deletes the node. Pretty handy. So you may be at this point of the video where you're saying, Daniel, why are you showing us this? Like, I'm never going to use this in Blender. It's completely useless. Well, that's where you're either wrong or you're just not being creative enough, because this kind of distortion can be used very creatively with things like holograms, greebles, mixing up textures, honestly blending UV tiled images together and getting rid of seams, which I have done in my recent material pack. There is included an anti-tiling node for location, scale, and rotation, and has some really cool mosaic tricks that basically blur the edges and make the seams way less noticeable for tiling textures, and randomizes it. And I use similar techniques as this to do that. All right, so let's plug this back into one of these cool noise patterns and kind of get back to what we were doing before, but we're going to use some other noise patterns as vector instead of checkers, because checkers is just one type of thing you can make. There are so many other repeating noise patterns we can use as a vector system. So we're gonna do that. So I am going to leave this little setup. I'm going to get rid of this gradient. We don't need that. And I'm going to get rid of my image. I don't need that anymore. So we're going to plug in this vector data into this this little, what are these called? A reroute. So let me clean this up here. There we go. There we go. So this reroute here just splits up the vector data into the same data, but it goes to each of these three nodes, these noise nodes. So what's going to be our incoming data is no longer checkers. We're going to make a few other things here. You can use images. You can use black and white or colored images as a vector. I don't know what to use. I'm just going to system because it sounds cool. It just sounds really cool when you see that. But I'm going to make my own using Voronoi first. So Voronoi texture, here we go. We're going to set it to Chebyshev, which makes a square grid, and it does need a color ramp to make it harsh. So if you're using vector data that is not harsh, like black to white or gray, if it's smooth like a noise pattern or Musgrave, you're going to get warping and weird watery effects. And I need to go back to previewing my final output, which is the emissions at the very end. So Control Shift, click on that. We should be back to normal viewing. There we go, our boring stuff there. Okay, so I'm going to preview this. So I've got this square pattern coming into a color ramp, which I'm going to add some contrast with. We want it pretty harsh, because if you have gradations like this and values, it's going to do weird, warpy, melty looks, which may be cool, but for techno stuff and for pixel art, it's not really what you're going for. You can even make this easier on yourself and just set it to constant, and you just move one of the black or the white point, and you'll get this stuff. Okay, so let's make a few of these. I'm going to Shift D, move it down here, make a mix RGB, and we're basically recreating what I did earlier with the checkers. So previewing this node, we've got, we need to add some variation. So I'm going to do scale 15. So between large and medium. And then we can make another one down here. Plug this one in. So now we're fading between the large and medium and what will be small. Do 30. Oh, I need to preview this node. There we go. So that's what it was before. Adding a little bit of something on top, we get this. And don't forget to play with these settings as well, because you can get some cool looks. I'm gonna actually change this to multiply. And I want it to be more lines. There we go, cool. Yeah, some black in there. Awesome. So remember, the black parts of the noise or whatever we apply this to is going to shift to the, it's going to basically slide it to the bottom left, or it's going to look up to the top right and grab that and move it back here. And then gray and white are going to do the opposite from the other corner. So let's go back to previewing the final result, which is the emissions node. Okay. And what are we actually seeing here? Let's turn off this fader. And we are going to be applying this vector system. Remember, that's my new frame. That's my new phrase. Applying it to, let's see, which noise do we want to play with? We'll just do this kind of basic noise right here. This is just a noise texture. So look, as we fade in, you can see some squares emerging. And the further we apply this vector system to that noise, the stronger it's going to get. To the point where we're almost getting down to like just blocks and bits, and it's really destroyed. I kind of like it in the middle, because it looks sort of like a map, but it's still sort of techno. And we can change the color ramp here. I have a bunch of pre-made color ramps for you, just to save you some time. Let's find one that we like. Okay, this one's pretty cool. And remember, you have some other controls such as contrast and complexity, which you need to move very slowly and carefully. That's pretty cool. And let's go back to our vector system crossfader. And by crossfade, I mean from original UV to the tweaked out crazy UV vector data like that, which is essentially grabbing different colors of the final noise and just applying it to this guy up here. So pretty cool. One thing that I really enjoyed doing was, instead of using Voronoi, I actually used one of my personally created procedural pattern generator node, which you can buy on Gumroad or Blender Market. I think it's like a few bucks, but it's really cool. I'm going to append it and you'll see what it does. So pattern generator, node group, and I'm going to append a few of these. I'm going to grab the grid, the complex grid, and let's do pixel grid just for fun. So append. So now those node groups are in here. So Shift A. We've got, I'm going to do cross grid first. Let's preview this and see what it looks like. Oh yeah, we need some UV. We need some UV data for this to work. There we go. So we've got scale, and there's some other things we can tweak and make it like different types of different shapes. So layering this is going to be really fun, as you may already be expecting. And the UV map is not correctly shaped. Let me fix that. Unwrap. There we go. Okay, perfect square UV. Nice. Let me get a shape that I like, and I'm going to start layering these just like I did earlier to get something cool. That's pretty neat right there. There's about 3 things going on there. So I'm going to make a bunch of these. So I'm going to speed this part up because I already did it earlier, and you'll see what I'm doing. Okay. All right, so we've got 4 of the same procedural pattern generator node group, and I have not changed any of the parameters yet. They're all the same, but I did play with, I put the second one on overlay and this other one on difference. So if I zoom in, you can see there's some pretty cool complex stuff going on here with all these different things, you know, at different scales and placements. And you can also play with the offset of some of these to shift them around, which, as you can, let me zoom out some more. As you can see, it just changes things up. You know, you don't have to have stuff perfectly centered. It's art after all. It can be imperfect. So play with X and Y, and you can of course tweak into this stuff too. Lots of possibilities there and cool stuff. And all this is just to give us a really harsh but varied vector system. There's my word again. Copyright, Daniel Grove, 2022. And we're going to plug this into something. So plug this into color 2. Remember, this is our crossfader. And now this is already set up here, going to our noises. Let's preview the final output here and see what it's given us. Cool. Oh, I'm going to give it a, let's use a different color scheme too. All right, that looks pretty gnarly. Also, we've been just applying this to a noise texture. We can do it to some Voronoi dots. and play with the scale. That looks amazing. Oh my gosh, that is so freaking cool. We got our W factor here for endless variation. Dude, this is so cool. Imagine animating this in slow motion, having just a really cool background for something. We can add Moosegrave to the mix, just a little, kind of, again, I love those crossfaders. You can just add a little bit or a lot. This is a lot. It's kind of gross, but we can play with that scale as well, make it big or small. Like, you know what? None. I love this harsh circle art. Oh, that's so beautiful. That is really cool. I got to make some variations of this later and render them. Okay, so this will be fun to play with. Let's go back. So here is our vector system crossfader. Sounds so cool. All the way up, again, it's just sampling colors at this point. It's enhanced things so large that there is no visible detail in the noise, because it is scaling things up as things get more intense. But if you pull it back a little bit, we get that. It's continually going to zoom out to where the Voronoi dots are a little bit more normal scaled. And here we are, the original, with just a normal, untweaked out UV applied. But if we start applying a little bit at a time, you can see the crosses showing up. I love this little spot in the middle. Watch this. This is cool. It's like a mask. Oh my goodness. I love this. This would take me so long to make in Photoshop, like this image right here. But with just a few tweaks, maybe 10 minutes of time, I got to this in Blender. Now let's play with these mix RGBs here, which are blending these 4 cross patterns. So this last one is on difference, which does a lot of wild stuff. Difference is crazy. I don't usually use it because the results are usually ugly, but in this case, they're just abstract enough to be great. This is pretty cool. Overlay. And this is just a normal mix between large and medium scale. You can use screen, multiply, overlay, because they don't totally overlap the previous data. They just layer new stuff on top. Let's go to this actual Voronoi texture and play with it. Randomness is, of course, all the way up just for randomness, but we can put this back to 0. So this is like a grid of dots. We can play with our hue slider to get something else. My eyes are hurting. Ooh, that's kind of pop arty. Play with our contrast. And our complexity slider. That looks really cool. I love that. Dude, this would be a sweet like album background or something. This is cool. And don't you dare write me about making NFTs. Don't you do it. I'm not doing it. Not drinking that Kool-Aid. That's pretty cool. Very industrial. Okay, one last thing is to show you how to make these renders just pop a little bit extra and to speed things up. Because these are not ray tracing or traditional 3D renders, we don't need ray tracing. So we can actually switch to Eevee for real-time renders and super fast outputs. And the noise doesn't really matter. I would just put it down to 8, just what's fast. And you can apply bloom. I like to do it in compositing. So here's how to do that. Go to your compositing window or compositor, turn on the nodes on top for use nodes. In the middle of the input and output, do Shift A, type in GL for glare, change this to fog glow, put it down to like, I don't know, 0.5, and choose high for high quality blur. And let's hit render. Look at that, instant render. And the compositor took about 2 seconds. And then it's got like a nice little glow on top. If you want that, you can do other cool stuff like the lens distortion for some chromatic aberration around the corners. Put this dispersion like .1 is probably too much. Let's see what it looks like. Oh yeah, way too much. .02 is probably a good amount. This is more something you use for, you know, photorealistic renders to get some camera imperfections. But it just looks cool. Well, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't like bore you or lose anybody along the way, because I know this is a little bit more of like just an experiment for learning type video. Some of this isn't totally usable, but others, obviously, like this last stuff that we got to, I think was really beautiful. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, ask down below. If you have any suggestions or improvements to the file that I'm selling online, well, this one, the file here is free, but the other stuff, yeah, I'm always open to feedback. Get my procedural pattern generator, tons of fun stuff you can do with that. And above all else, thank you for watching. I hope you will be back here soon.